Good morning and welcome to this week's live IGTV. Today I'm talking about expectations versus encouragement and how you can use those to truly motivate your teen so that they maybe show up for school or, hand in an assignment or two, and you can be less so friggin' frustrated with them all the time why they simply refuse to do basics to graduate, to pass. Like, how is that so hard? Why is that so hard to understand? So today I'm going to unpack for you the difference between expectation and encouragement and how your teenager's brain receives those and why it's kind of counterintuitive to actually getting what you want for your teen in defining how success rolls out for them. Okay, so I'm going to look at my laptop a lot today because I have a lot of notes that I want to cover. So if I'm looking down, it's just because I'm looking at my laptop, okay? My name is Allie Payne. I'm a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, and I have been working with parents of teens for the last 15 years to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blow-ups, and stressful silences to create relationships built on trust and respect. I was a very troubled teen. I also went from straight A's to F's and failing out. So I really understand this whole not showing up, skipping school, not doing assignments thing, because I did all of it. And I am also a parent to two incredible sons and have been understanding and doing this work both from a teenager's perspective and having been a parent. So I hope today what I'm going to show you and what I'm going to talk to you about turns a few wheels so that you get more of what you want, but in a way that actually works. Thank you so much for jumping in. I'm so grateful that you're here. Before I get into the meat of this content, I just want to say this. If anything I'm going to say today is helpful to you, etc., hit the follow, Instagram, subscribe on YouTube. I also have my 5 days to a better relationship with your teen. It starts on Monday, April 4th. You can find the registration via the link in my bio here in Instagram. You can go to my website, alliepayne.com. It's right on the very top. You don't have to look anywhere. It's just right there, alliepayne.com. I strongly recommend you join me. It's $15 for 5 days of some of the most powerful, proven, simple tools to instantly improve your relationship with your teen. And one of them is about this whole expectation thing. So let's get into it, shall we? Okay. So your teenager is having school avoidance. They're not handing in assignments. Maybe they're lying to you about assignments. And their school, for whatever reason, is going down, 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 down. You are probably getting messages from the school saying that your teenager is either not showing up, or you're getting those messages from the school that say that, basically in a word, your teenager is not handing in assignments and what we've tried isn't working, so you should just be a better parent and get them to do that. I'm not against teachers in any way, but I'm just going to say for reals right now, it's a broken system. Passing on or parent shaming so that you pass that parent shame onto your teenager to make them care won't work. So if you're here to try and make your child care or motivate them, stick with me, because this is going to go in a direction that you might not have expected, but it's actually the thing you most need to hear. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to define for you what is an expectation. Okay, so let's actually talk about what is an expectation for real. I looked up some definitions. I found them rather enlightening. Here we go. An expectation is a belief that someone will or should achieve something. An expectation is a belief that someone will or should achieve something. Key word there is should. Should. Yeah. Okay, so I looked up should. You ready for this? Should refers to a belief or desired outcome held by you that is important to you. That's what should means. So when you are shoulding on your teenager, which is passing your expectations onto your teenager, okay, this is what ends up happening. It is used to indicate an obligation, duty, or correctness, typically when criticizing someone's actions. I'm going to read that again. This is from the dictionary. Should is used to indicate obligation, duty, or correctness, typically when criticizing someone's actions. Okay. That's what's happening when you use expectations on your teenager as a method to change their behavior. Okay? Follow with me through this, because if you're sitting there going like, oh yeah, so I should just have no expectations. Yeah, that's stupid parenting. Okay, you're entitled to that. Stick with me. Okay? How do you feel when someone tries to force their beliefs on you and how you should live your life? Seriously, write it in the comments. How do you feel when someone tries to force their beliefs on you about how you should live your life? Do you feel criticized in that same moment? Like somehow the way you're doing your life is wrong? I'm going to guess yes. Okay, you don't like it at all. Thank you for sharing. Attacked. Ooh, that is a good word. Thank you, Stephanie. Yes. Attacked. Okay, so patronized. Oh my gosh, that is a fantastic, yes, patronized, irritated, angry, judged. Thank you for participating. So if that's your first reaction in that moment, what do you think your teenager's reaction is? Or maybe a better question is, why do you think your teenager's reaction would be any different? Generally, your teenager feels defensive. They feel attacked, they feel judged, angry, and they feel defensive. And so when they feel defensive, because your teenager's brain lacks impulse control, emotional regulation, and the ability to effectively articulate all of that, which you have just done so well, thank you. Your teenager generally goes to this particular position. Screw you! Except they're only holding up one of those four, so you decide which one. Screw you. And even if you are right, or the way that you are suggesting and forcing, okay, might be right or better, your teenager or me or you is most definitely not going to do it. They're going to dig in their heels because they're at screw you. So this is what happens with expectations when they are used as behavior modifiers, okay? Expectations are necessary, stick with me, but expectations do not work as behavior modifiers for that exact reason. Because right in the definition of expectation is the word should, and in the word should is, in the actual definition of should, typically used when criticizing someone's actions. Okay, so I have an example for you. If you were to come on here, I mean, all of you gorgeous people, thank you for joining me here today. If you were to come on any of my social channels every day, and I tell you my expectations of what a good parent is, and I point out how you are not meeting my expectations, me, Allie Payne, like whoever I am, so you're obviously a lazy, irresponsible, and unmotivated parent. How do you feel about me now? How do you feel about me now? You probably wouldn't stick around and listen to any of my videos, and you probably would unfollow or just put up a whole bunch of hate comments, right? You're out. Yeah. Exactly. You'd be out. You'd obviously, forgot. Yes. You would forget what I've been saying. You wouldn't really care about anyway. Care about your attendance, but you have no choice in the future. It didn't go down well. Exactly. You'd literally just be all the things you accuse me of, because why bother? Exactly, right? So if I came on my social channels every day and I tried to use expectations on you to change your behavior by telling you what you should do, criticizing you, and labeling you as obviously lazy, irresponsible, and unmotivated parent, do you give a crap? Do you give a flying crap about anything I have to say? Now, anytime my name came out of your mouth, probably wouldn't be something flattering that followed it, right? Not that there currently is. Okay. So your teen is essentially trying to unfollow you. Yeah, well, you can, so the defensive reaction of just purposely not doing what you're told is part of the teenage brain and their massive growing desire for independent thinking, independent choice, differentiation. Literally, the psychological process of differentiating. They are in a process of intending to be different than you. So if you are using this whole expectation thing as a behavior modifier, it just becomes food and fodder for their need to differentiate, which means I'm just going to do everything that you're not telling me to do. I'm just going to use that as a way of pressing against you. So it can be related to trauma, but yes, it's also, you're still fighting for independence 100%, yes. And as is the teenage brain. So if your teen is trying to unfollow you, they're just basically giving you the giant screw you, and they're doing everything that you don't want them to. Okay, teens, I'm reading off my laptop here because I took so many notes. This is so important for me to get this correct. Teens are already very, very insecure, and it's a natural, normal part of their adolescent brain development. Their self-esteem, particularly in girls, can drop up to 30%, and they are wildly susceptible to, wait for it, criticism, judgment, and comparison. Ha-ha! 2 of the 3 of those are the outcomes of being on the receiving end of constant expectation. Even though you as a parent are trying to use expectations as a behavior modifier. So do you get the disconnect here? You're trying to use expectations to change their behavior, to get them to comply and become, like, at least graduate, like seriously things that seem so fundamentally basic. And your teenager feels criticized and judged, and so they are going, screw you, and head in the other direction. They're unfollowing. I am unfollowing you, parents. Okay, so let's walk this through. So expectations are a necessary part of life. I am not anti-expectation. I am very much about boundaries, which are not expectations. By the way, and if you're not familiar with the difference, I strongly recommend that you join me next week in my 5-day challenge, 5 days to a better relationship with your teen. It's 5 days of some of the best, powerful, proven tips you're going to get for $15 Canadian. And if you're not already in it, I don't know why. So head to my website, alipayne.com. It's right along the top. You can register, or you can tap on my name, then hit the link in my bio. The registration's there. So expectations are necessary, and they are very important for life in general to function well. Okay? Here's why. I have an expectation, the world, your neighbor, has an expectation that you are going to stop at a stop sign. If I am driving on the same road as you, I have an expectation that you are going to stop at a red light so that I can go at the green light and be safe. Like, that's just a general, those are rules, but that is an expectation. Expectation falls under rules as well. Okay. Showing up for work. Your employer has an expectation that you are going to show up for work on time, and then you're going to do the work that you were hired to do. And then you have an expectation of your employer that you are going to get paid fairly for that work that you do, and you're going to get paid in a timely manner for that. Those are expectations. Those are awesome. Okay. There is also an expectation of parents that you are going to parent your child in a way that meets their basic human needs, like food, shelter, physical safety, psychological safety, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay? Those are all expectations of like the school system has an expectation that you're going to do what it takes to help your teenager to do things in the way that work for them. That may not work for your teenager. But your state, your city, they have an expectation that your teenager is going to get to school. In a lot of places, it's a truancy if they miss school. Okay? So, expectations are necessary in many ways. And if they're necessary, aren't parents supposed to enforce expectations? Like, that's confusing. If expectations are required, like you're going to leave your house wearing some basic clothing. You're not going to run around naked all day. You know, not that I'm against nudity, but there are certain cultural expectations. There's certain work expectations. There's like rules, expectations within the law. And so why then is this quack lady, Allie Payne, saying that enforcing those expectations with your teenager isn't working? Like, what now? I'm confused. Okay, so here's the disconnect. This is what I need you to know. Expectations work at a behavioral level. So behaviors, which I talked about, like stopping at a stop sign, stop at a red light, go at a green light. Please wear a basic amount of clothes when you leave the house. Show up for the work that you were hired to do on time. If you're the employer, pay the person fairly in a timely manner. Those are all necessary expectations, and they are behavioral. Yes? Those are behaviors. Okay. Expectations are transactional. They are transactional. Here's a set of expectations set out, whether it is law or employer or cultural, whatever. Here's a basic set of expectations that I'll set out for you to stay out of trouble, even if you don't agree with them, okay? So if you stop at stop signs, you're probably not going to get a ticket. If you stop at a red light, you're probably going to save someone's life, and maybe yours, be safe. Even if you don't agree with them. It doesn't guarantee that you'll be successful if you choose to behave within those expectations. It doesn't guarantee your success. But you'll have probably less obstacles. You're going to have less jail time. Right? So behaviors, if you choose to show up to school, if you choose to hand in your assignments, even at a really basic level, you might have less obstacles because you won't have to retake courses, figure out how to graduate in a different way or maybe in a delayed time frame. So yeah, just less obstacles if you follow behavioral expectations. Okay? But expectations, because they work at a behavioral level, they require compliance. Okay? Compliance is a pass-fail black-white concept. That's what compliance is. It is relative to the law, to comply. Okay? Pass-fail black-white, which is void of the key factors behind all behavior and motivation. Even though you might have been raised to think that compliance equals intelligence, respect, upright citizens. I was too. It doesn't. It does not. All you got was you earned love and approval from your parent or your teacher or whomever. That's all you got. It doesn't necessarily make you a more respectful person. It doesn't make you a better person because you were compliant. I was raised that way too. Previous generations were absolute authority, were raised that compliance was a sign of intelligence. It's not true. Tell that to all the people who innovated different things, who Beethoven, Chopin, the artists who didn't make it in the real world because they weren't compliant. And yet they innovated and changed their industry. Look at Steve Jobs. Oh my gosh, you want to find someone who was not compliant. Woohoo! Not compliant. Steve Jobs. Heaven forbid, where would we be without computers and phones? Because he wasn't compliant. Was he not intelligent? You'd be hard pressed to say he wasn't intelligent. What about Bill Gates? He was compliant in a way, but he was also very uncompliant in a lot of ways. So our world has moved forward and innovated, actually not because of compliance. Our world has moved forward because of cycle breakers, whistleblowers, people who think outside the box, people who are willing to look at and do things differently. Does that make them not intelligent? Just look at your argument. Just look at your argument. That's all I'm asking, okay? Because expectations require compliance and our black and white pass fail, they reinforce criticism. Compliance requires criticism because you either got it right or you didn't. The teenage brain internalizes all failure, internalizes all criticism. Criticism with your teenager, judgment with your teenager, will drive disconnection and defensiveness and defiance so fast it'll be like an F1 car fueled with nitro with a foot on the floor speeding off the line. Expectations work at a behavioral level. Okay. Expectations and compliance are about earning love and approval. And even though that's how you were raised, that's how teenagers are telling me that their parents are raising them. They are only loved if they comply with their parents. And if they don't comply, they are told repeatedly that they are failing and they are a failure. They are embarrassing. They are disappointing. They are lazy. They are irresponsible, and so on and so on and so on. Disconnection, disrespect, defiance. It's not getting you where you want, even though that's what you might have been taught. And I understand that. I was raised that way too. Behaviors are driven by emotion. All behavior is driven by emotion. That is a psychological, a fundamental fact. Yes, that is conditional love. That is conditional love. Yes. And that is how a lot of us, it's how our parents were raised too. So, this isn't about blaming or throwing anybody else under the bus. We're just simply changing the fundamental nature because we have, fortunately now, the relational and psychological studies to show the impact, long-term impacts of trauma in the brain and conditional love when we have our childhood emotional neglect, CEN, actually occurs. Because when we raise children under expectations and compliance, we are teaching them to abandon and suppress themselves for the need of approval of others. Abandon and suppress what is true for them for the sake of approval of others. There are long-term impacts to that I live every day that I would never want for another teenager in this world. Okay, so behaviors are driven by emotions 100% of the time. That's not negotiable. That is a psychological fact. All behavior is driven by emotion, okay? So let's start the equation. Expectations are a behavioral, transactional thing, okay? You do this, you get this. If you show up to class, do the minimum, you get a GED. If you stop at stoplights, you won't get a ticket. If you stop at red lights, and you probably won't kill someone. Like that, it's you do this, you get this. That's transactional, okay? Expectations lead to shoulding, which is a direct form of criticism. Expectations is shoulding, which is direct form of criticism. So what is an emotion then? What is an emotion? Because you and I probably weren't raised on how to connect emotionally, because our parents weren't taught that either. They were taught to control behavior. And that's what then we try and do that with our teens, and it's not working. There's a massive disconnect. So what is an emotion? Emotions are a biological and psychological occurrence in the body. There is a biological response to emotion. There's a chemical produced in the brain. There is a psychological, the neural pathways, the electron part of the body. That wasn't said very well. Each manifested in an organized, recurring pattern of associated behavior. Okay, I'm going to read that one more time without my own definition to make it more sense. The definition, the clinical definition of an emotion: a biological and physiological response manifested into an organized, recurring, associated pattern of behavior. Emotions drive behavior. That is from Wilson Mendenhall, 2013. That's credited to Wilson Mendenhall, 2013. That is the definition of an emotion. All emotions drive behavior. So when parenting is done from behavior, if this was behavior, if parenting is done top down from behavior to try and change behavior, you are not getting what you need. When parenting is done from emotions, acknowledging that all emotions drive behavior, and a parenting is done from emotions up to behavior, that's where you get the results that you're looking for. Okay, so if you want to change your teenager's behavior by building motivation, and yet you're using negative emotional tools like shoulding and criticism, those are negative emotional tools. So you're trying to use expectations to build motivation, but what you're actually doing is using negative emotional manipulation, coercion, negative reinforcement at an emotional level. It creates defensiveness. It's demotivating because you're using negative labels and derogatory terms like lazy and irresponsible. Your teenager is never going to change their behavior if this is the receiving end experience that they're getting. And if I came to you and tried to do the same to you, and I constantly told you how you were not meeting my expectations of being a parent, I mean, oh my gosh, I can't even believe you think you're a good parent. Can't believe it. As if you think these things are going to work. You also would feel defensive, defiant. And if I did it to you every single day, day after day after day, I told you what a crappy parent you were because you weren't meeting these psychological standards, you would also be demotivated to try something different until at such point you would probably stop trying. This is what's happening to your teen. Do you see the problem here? Here's a metaphor for you. When your teenager hits the adolescent brain development stage in which they are physiologically intended, like this, they're not like some evil child trying to be mean to you. It is a natural, necessary part of their life to differentiate, to be different than you. That is necessary, or they are going to wildly fail as a human, okay? So in their effort to be different from you, And in the process of adolescent brain development, where their their self-confidence naturally drops up to 30% because their brain is overwriting the simplistic identity that they knew of themselves and rewriting a more complex version. Nice. That gap where they knew who they were and they liked who they were, and then that's being literally erased by their brain, overwritten, this gap here before their brain develops and solidifies a new complex identity necessary for self-reflection and to be a mature adult. That's where the self-esteem drops. In there, it's about a 2-year process. Nice. In there, your teenager often feels like they are drowning. Okay, so I want you to just go with me for a second. They feel like they're drowning. Now, a drowning person actually does not, if you look up the science of drowning, they don't flail. A drowning person doesn't flail. That's a myth. It's a complete and wild myth. Okay. Sorry, is it different to have the expectations but without the name calling and conversation? How compliance is necessary to build the needed skills to meet their goals. You can talk about and support your teenager on what the necessary steps are to meet their goals. But reinforcing that because now it's important to you, because let's go back to the definition. The definition of an expectation is a belief that someone will or should achieve something. Now you are taking ownership for something that's important to you and you are shoulding it, you're forcing it on your teen because it's a desired outcome held by you, and shoulding is indicating obligation, duty, or correctness, typically when criticizing someone's actions. So the answer to that is no. Stick with me on this, okay? So here's the metaphor of drowning. So when someone is actually drowning, they are not flailing about in the water. That is a myth. That is not what actual drowning looks like. Drowning is their arms are generally out to the side, barely moving, and their feet are generally straight down. So they're in like a T shape, not moving, not actually moving, which is partly why they start to go under the water. So what happens is they tip their head back and all that is above the water is barely their mouth and their nose. Okay, so that is actually what happens in drowning. This is how your teenager feels. In their new brain, as a function of the development in their brain, your teenager already feels like they're drowning. They're drowning in a massive development of more complex thought, emotions. They don't yet have all the software to use all the new hardware their brain is developing. It develops randomly. It's not even linear. So they already feel like, a lot of them, they feel like they're drowning. Okay. So imagine they're drowning. The water is right here. Okay. Here's what expectations do to a teenager who already feels like they're drowning. An expectation is you taking your hand on their head and pushing them under the water. That's what an expectation does. They're already drowning. Your expectations of what they should do, which is criticizing how they're doing it, pushes their head further under the water. And that is why your teen does the opposite to what you want and gets worse, not better. Because expectations increase their experience of drowning. Okay. Here's the solution. Rather than push your teenager further under the water, and by the way, I'm not making this stuff up. There was another S word there. I'm not making this stuff up. Teenagers tell me this every single day. They DM me every day. I also personally lived this, going from straight A's, award-winning academic athletic student in grade 8, like through my life. And then all of a sudden things started to build up. I had no coping techniques. I had no emotional coping, and went from A's to F's to failing out and a suicide attempt. So I'm talking to you right now from very personal experience, not from some book I read, and I'm going to try and just dial myself back right now. Expectations push down. Encouragement lifts up. Encouragement takes them by the waist and lifts their head out of the water just enough so they can breathe. Encouragement. Here's the definition of encouragement: to give support, confidence, or hope. Now, if you're drowning emotionally, do you want to feel criticized or do you want to feel comforted? If you are already drowning emotionally, do you want to be told how you're doing it wrong and should on or criticized, or do you want to feel supported and be given hope? I'm just finishing reading the definition of encouragement. To support and give advice to someone so they will continue to do something, which I think is what a lot of us think based on how we were raised, we're doing with expectations. What you're doing to reinforce an expectation is, I think, what you are intending to do, because I believe you're a good parent, is you're trying to encourage, but you're not, because we were never taught to understand the differentiation, okay? So to encourage is to support, give confidence, hope, and comfort. All right. So basically this comes down to this. If you're using expectations to try and motivate your teen and change their behavior, you are using criticism as a behavior modifier, which will never work, period. Doesn't work. If you use encouragement as a behavior modifier, you are offering comfort and confidence. It works every time. 100% of the time, pretty much. Expectations deal only with behavior at a transactional level. They require compliance and use conditional love and negative reinforcement, push down, underwater. Encouragement uses comfort, support, and building confidence to lift them up above the water so they can breathe. Okay? Brené Brown, I looked this up. How does she define encouragement? How does she define this feeling of letting go of expectation to encouragement and provide emotional support? And this is what it said. This is what I looked up this morning. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. Do you have the courage to show up for your teenager when you can't control them or the outcome? And yes, your teenager's likely going to dismiss your encouragement at first. Of course they are. Because if they have been hearing expectation, criticism, and shoulding, and then you start to encourage, they're not going to believe that you have made that distinction. They're not going to believe that you have made that leap. And if your encouragement still sounds like expectation, they're going to be like, get lost, unfollow, I'm out, get away from me. That's what I did to my parents. Because they only wanted to encourage me so that it worked for them. It still had strings attached. So let me read this again. This is how I'm going to wrap this up. Encouragement is this: having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. Thank you for sharing that. It took 2 months of you to stop yelling for your daughter to believe it. You had to do it over and over and over. It takes consistency to build trust back. Because if you've been using expectations and compliance with should and criticism, your teenager doesn't trust you. You've broken trust. And trust is fundamental to any healthy relationship. You cannot have a healthy relationship with trust. Trust is broken in a moment, and it takes a lot of consistency to rebuild. Read Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust, the science behind trust. Consistent, consistent, consistent. Are you willing and courageous to show up enough for your teen, even though you can't control them? Are you willing to feel uncomfortable and not in control to support your teen in their emotional needs, which are key to building their confidence as a true motivational driver? Are you willing? Here's what I want to ask you. Are you also willing enough to identify your own fear story of failure? When you are willing to identify your story, fear story of failure that was ingrained in you when you were a child, as with your parents, my failure story, I was grounded if I even got a B. I was shunned, shamed. I was emotionally punished and berated. That was what happened when I failed. That's my failure story. That's what drives my current anxiety and trauma-driven perfectionism. Grounding will never work. Grounding says, you failed. You are a failure. You're embarrassing to me. Grounding can work. I should be careful. Grounding can work, just not in this situation. It doesn't work. Okay? So, are you willing to identify your own fear story of failure? What were you told would happen if you failed? What happened when you failed? Are you willing to be really honest with yourself about how your fear story of failure is now showing up for you as a parent with your child? And please hear me, this doesn't make you bad or wrong. It doesn't. It makes you a product of your environment, which is a lot of how our brains are wired to operate. And all I know is you're here now watching this. And you're willing. And I honor your courage for being here. I honor your open-mindedness for even asking how you can help. This is one of the biggest ways. You don't have to like me. You don't have to want to be my friend. This is for your teen. I'm here for your teen. You are a great parent, and I already know that about you. And here's what else I know. You don't need to perform to keep that story of earning love and approval going. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, if they need your teen to perform, to deem you as a fit, worthy, good parent, then either you need to get new friends or they need to own and check their own stories. Because that doesn't need to drive you. And I know it's wildly pervasive in every culture in the world. Your teen is counting on your courage to see that old fear story and let it go. So you get in the mess with them in the pool where they're drowning, and you get beside them and you lift them up just enough so they can get some oxygen and breathe to figure out who they are and some coping strategies and build some confidence and comfort rather than enforce expectation, which pushes them down below the water where they truly are drowning. Encouraging isn't raising snowflakes or pansies. It's not condoning failure or not trying. It is acknowledging that you cannot control your child and that in fact the only way to support them is through emotions from the bottom up, not by pushing down from behavior. Encouraging is not ignoring expectations, but it is letting go of the fear and necessary compliance around them to help your teen find their own way to succeed, not your way to succeed. Do I believe your teenager probably is best and will have less obstacles in life if they graduate? Yeah, of course I do. Does that mean that they're going to graduate? I don't know. Does it mean that they won't and cannot be successful if they don't graduate? Hell no, it doesn't. I can tell you probably 12 different billionaires, wildly successful people in the world who didn't graduate school. School was not for them. Our school system is antiquated. I am not against teachers, but teachers are operating in a broken system, and school system is not for everyone. So stop trying to make your teenager be that compliant, perfect child to make you look like a good parent. Stop. Please. Now, if you want to have more tools, acknowledging you can't control your child, understanding where behavior change actually starts and ends is through emotions, then you're going to want to watch on my YouTube channel or over on my alipayne.com. You can search it, 12 tips for back to school success. It's got all of the tips to help your teenager develop their own strategies for success as you become their ally, not their judge and jury. Or 10 ways to build your teen's confidence. It is my most popular blog by far. You can find it on my website. There's a little magnifying glass. If you just pull your screen on your phone over to the left a little bit, you'll see a magnifying glass. Just search 12 tips or 10 ways. Those articles will come up. These are also full YouTube videos. If you search my YouTube channel, Ali Payne. If you can't find them, please message me here on Instagram at Ali Payne. I will happily direct you to 12 tips for back to school success and 10 ways to build your teen's confidence. I want to thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank you for listening to the distinction and the necessary difference between expectations and encouragement relative to motivating your teen, and why expectations will continue to get you more of what you don't want and your teenager can barely manage, and why encouragement is, I'm sure, what you have always intended. But the truth behind encouragement and what your teenager is desperately banking on you getting into and behind. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing and participating in this conversation. Please reach out to me. And if you are still looking for more answers, get into my 5-day challenge that starts next week. 5 days to a better relationship with your teen. These are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. And you got to get in there. You can get there through my website, alipayne.com, hit the banner across the top, or tap my name here on Instagram, the link in my bio. It'll say register for the 5-day challenge right there. So I will see you there. And if not, next Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, I'm here every week talking about all things parenting teens. Thanks, everybody. Have an amazing weekend.